Some royal women wore crowns in public, but were written out in private. When kings, princesses, and billionaires passed, their wills told a colder story. A princess left with nothing after decades of loyalty. A queen's daughter erased with a single signature, and heirs who discovered too late that the palace had quietly turned its back. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate acts of exclusion hidden behind royal walls. So which royal women were cut out completely? Here are
12 royal women who were cut out of inheritance and succession.
At number 12, missing her inheritance, we have Princess Norah of Liechtenstein. She is the only sister of Prince Hans Adam II. Liechtenstein is unique as the last European monarchy practicing strict agnatic primogeniture, meaning only male dynasts can succeed. And as such, Princess Norah has zero succession rights in her country. She was from birth excluded from any chance of reigning. Therefore, she has been excluded from the royal will. Liechtenstein's house law, rooted in a 1606 family pact, stipulates only the male line males may inherit princely throne. This means that although Norah is a child of a ruling prince and sibling of the current reigning prince, she is completely bypassed in favor of male relatives. For perspective, upon her father's death in 1989, the throne went to the eldest brother, Hans Adam II. Even if Hans Adam had had no sons, the law provides that either one of the distant male cousins would adopt or would inherit, not Norah. International organizations have critiqued Liechtenstein's law. In the early 2000s, even the United Nations Committee voiced concern about the exclusion of female succession in such a modern state. Prince Hans Adam defended the status quo vigorously. Within Liechtenstein itself, there's been little domestic pressure to change it, partly because of the princely family being small and male lines have continued. Royal chroniclers have often mentioned that Liechtenstein stands alone in Europe for quote-unquote practicing strict agnatic primogeniture, meaning only males can inherit the throne there. At number 11, we have Princess Delphine of Belgium. She is the extramarital daughter of King Albert II. For most of her life, she was not legally recognized as the King Charles and thus completely excluded from any royal inheritance or status. Delphine's mother, Baroness Sybil de Sayas Longchamps, had a long affair with Albert. Delphine grew up as Delphine Boyle with no acknowledgement from Albert. It was only after a protracted court battle from 2013 to 2020 and a DNA test that Albert II admitted paternity. In 2020, a Belgian court ruled Delphine is entitled to the status of Princess of Belgium. However, crucially, she was born out of wedlock. So, Delphine and her descendants remain excluded from the line of succession to the throne and thus from the will. Belgian laws limit succession rights to legitimate descendants of King Leopold I, which Delphine now is, but the requirement of the monarch's consent to marriage of parents was not met, and historically, illegitimate children have no succession rights. Thus, while she did gain a title in place in the family by court order, she did not gain any claim to the throne. The handling of Delphine's case has been closely followed in the media. It underscores the distinction between being recognized as a royal child and being an actual heir. Belgian constitutional experts pointed out because Delphine was born out of wedlock, she does not enter the will. Next, we have Princess Margaretha Louise of Norway. She is the elder child of King Harald V and Queen Sonja of Norway. At her birth, Norway's constitution still followed male-only primogeniture, meaning she was not eligible to inherit the throne if she had a brother. 2 years later, her younger brother Håkon was born and became crown prince, cementing Martha's exclusion from the will. In 1990, Norway amended its succession law to absolute primogeniture, but crucially, this applied only to those born after the law changed. Because Margaretha Louise was born before 1990, the reform did not elevate her over her brother. She did gain a formal place in succession, but she remained behind her brother and later his children. Thus, by a quirk of timing, the princess was effectively excluded from ever being monarch, even though the absolute equality was introduced in principle during her time frame of being alive. Norway's succession law changed in 1990 and has been much commented on because of its partial retroactivity. The Constitution itself now enshrines absolute primogeniture, but it explicitly did not reorder Margaretha Louise and Anne. Contemporary accounts noted that this meant that the crown prince, Khan, and his eligible descendants thus take precedence over his older sister, and Princess Margaretha Louise did technically move from having zero succession rights to being third in line after Hakon's 2 kids once the law passed. But effectively, nothing changed regarding her exclusion from the top spot. The next 3 reveal harsh truths: queens who were announced, sisters erased, and princesses denied. by law. At number 9, we have Queen Anne-Marie of Greece. She was originally a Danish princess who, upon her marriage to King Constantine II of Greece in 1964, was required to renounce her own rights to succession to the Danish throne. As the youngest daughter of King Frederick IX of Denmark, Anne-Marie was third in line when she wed the Greek monarch. However, Danish constitutional law had recently changed to allow female succession only in the absence of brothers. Anne-Marie's elder sister, Margaretha, was already heir presumptive, and Margaretha's issue would come before Anne-Marie. Nonetheless, because Anne-Marie was marrying a foreign sovereign, the Danish government gave consent on the explicit condition that Anne-Marie renounce any claim for herself and her future offspring to Denmark's crown. This was intended to prevent a personal union or conflict of interest coming between the Greek and Danish monarchies. Thus, in 1964, 18-year-old Anne-Marie relinquished her succession rights in writing before departing to Athens as a bride. Hence, she was excluded from the Danish royal will. The renunciation was documented in the Danish royal law. A contemporary source notes, quote, "Consent to marriage was given on the condition that Anne-Marie renounced her succession rights to the Danish throne for herself and all of her descendants." This was widely reported in 64 when the wedding took place. Politically, it maintains a clear separation of the two monarchies' successions. Next, we have Princess Margaretha of Sweden. Margaretha, King Carl XVI Gustaf's eldest sister, was excluded from both the line of succession and the will due to Sweden's former laws and her marriage. At the time of Margaretha's birth, women could not inherit the Swedish throne at all. So despite being King Gustav VI Adolph's granddaughter, she was not in line. In 1947, a long-awaited son was born into her family. He became the heir, and Margaretha remained excluded by law. Later in 1964, Margaretha married a British commoner, John Ambler. By Swedish royal protocol of the era, this unequal match meant she voluntarily relinquished her style of quote-unquote Her Royal Highness and left Sweden. Although she retained the title of Princess Margaretha, by courtesy, she lost her remaining official royal status. Effectively, through a combination of legal tradition and marriage, Margaretha was removed from the succession equation entirely, thus from royal will. Her children, by Mr. Ambler, born in the late 1960s, were not given any royal titles themselves or succession rights either. Under the 1810 Act of Succession, any Swedish prince or princess marrying without government approval or outside royalty lost their succession rights and titles. Margaretha's case met those conditions. The announcement in June 1964 made it clear that as a result of her unequal marriage, she lost her style of Royal Highness and was henceforth Princess Margaretha, Mrs. Ambler. At number 7, we have Princess Irina of Romania. She is the daughter of King Michael I of Romania. Although the Romanian throne was abolished in 1947, the royal family maintains its own house rules and public roles. In 2014, Princess Irina was formally stripped of her royal title and excluded from her family's line of succession due to her own involvement in an unethical enterprise. Irina, who had been living in Oregon and Washington, was closed in 2013 for running an illegal business ring. Deeply embarrassed, King Michael reacted decisively. On the 29th of October 2014, he issued a decree removing Irina's title Princess of Romania and expelling her and her descendants from the line of succession to the defunct throne. Due to this step, Irina has been excluded from the will. Though Romania has no reigning monarch, King Michael's actions carried weight in Romanian society. The press widely reported that Princess Irina had been stripped of her title and her rights after the scandal. On October 29th, 2014, Irina's father revised the line of succession, removing her and her two children from the line. Royal watchers saw this as Michael upholding standards. A similar move had been made earlier when he excluded a grandson for bad behavior. The public largely approved, viewing it as a necessary distinction and distancing of the royal institution from unethical behavior by its members. The next 3 exposed royal bargains: birthrights surrendered, reputations shattered, and heirs exiled by family decree. Next, we have Queen Sophia of Spain. She experienced exclusion from succession in 2 royal contexts. Firstly, as a Greek princess, she was barred from the Greek throne by male preference primogeniture and by an explicit renunciation. Therefore, she was excluded from the royal will. Sophia was the elder sister of King Constantine II of Greece. When she married the future king Juan Carlos of Spain in 1962, she formally renounced her rights to the Greek throne for herself and for her future offspring. This was a condition set by the Greek government for the marriage of the king's sister to a foreign monarch. Additionally, even without a renunciation, Greek succession law in 1962 favored her younger brother. So Sophia would not have inherited the Greek crown unless all male dynasts were exhausted. Her renunciation simply codified what the law and her marriage made likely. She and her children would not be in the line for Greece. The act of renunciation was done by formal letters patented in 1962. It was noted in Greek official records and widely reported at the time. Essentially, Sophia's name was removed from Greece's line of succession despite her being the king's eldest child, because her marriage to a Catholic foreign royal was at odds with constitutional norms. Thus, she was excluded from the royal will, too. The Greek public accepted this as part of the marriage arrangements. At number 5, we have Princess Margaretha of Savoy. She's the eldest child of King Umberto II, the last reigning king of Italy. Despite being the firstborn, she was excluded from the line of succession to the Italian throne purely due to her gender. The Kingdom of Italy operated under Salic law, which allowed only male dynasts to inherit the throne. Thus, when Maria's father ascended the throne in 1946, the 12-year-old princess, though eldest, had no claim compared to her younger brother Vittorio Emanuele. Vittorio became crown prince of Naples from birth, bypassing Maria entirely. She was thus excluded from the will. When the monarchy was abolished later in 1946, the question became moot, but within the royal house of Savoy, the Salic succession continued to govern its claims. Maria's position remained that of a royal daughter with no rights to her father's titles or headship of the family. And for decades, the succession of the Savoys went unquestioned. Only in recent times has become the point of debate. In 2019, Marie's nephew hinted at considering a succession reform to absolute primogeniture for the house, which theoretically could place Maria in line of contention. This caused a family spat with a rival Savoy claimant. However, Maria herself did not press any claim in the royal will. Next, we have Infanta Elena of Spain. She is the eldest daughter of King Juan Carlos I and Queen Sophia. Under Spain's former succession law, Elena was replaced by her younger brother Philippe in the line of succession, despite being older. She was, for a time, heiress presumptive, but the arrival of a male heir meant Elena was excluded from even inheriting the crown and other rights, so as long that her brother or his lineage even exist. Thus, she was excluded from the royal will. In 1975, when Juan Carlos became king, young Elena moved from first in line to second place behind King Philippe, and after Philippe had children, she dropped further down. The Spanish Constitution in 1978 continued male preference succession, thus preferring King Philippe over Infanta Elena and her sister Cristina. Spain flirted with changing to absolute primogeniture in the early 2000s. There was public debate that it was unjust. Philippe, simply by being male, outranked Elena. However, because Philippe already had only daughters and no sons, the matter was not pressing for him. Ultimately, no constitutional amendment occurred. Thus, Spanish law still prefers males, a fact often noted. For instance, when Philippe's elder daughter, Leonor, was born in 2005, many pointed out that if Letizia later had a son, Leonor would lose her status too. Indeed, Elena's displacement by Philippe is a textbook example of discussions of succession bias. The final 3 unveil royalty's coldest acts: daughters disinherited, crowns rewritten, and loyalty buried beneath lineage. At number 3, we have Princess Anne, the Princess Royal. Princess Anne, the only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, was for many years excluded from a prominent place in Britain's line of succession due to male preference primogeniture. At the time of her birth and throughout the mid-20th century, younger male siblings overtook elder sisters for the throne. Thus, although Anne was Queen Elizabeth's second-born child, she was superseded by her younger brothers, Prince Andrew and Edward, in the order of succession. This left Anne with a much lower dynastic standing than her birth order alone would suggest. She went from being third in line at birth to eventually falling to fifth and further as her brothers had children themselves. Thus, she was then excluded from the royal will. By the late 20th century, there was growing commentary that it was unfair that Princess Anne and other royal women were to be penalized for purely their gender. This sentiment eventually led to a legal overhaul, but only decades later. In 2013, the UK passed the Succession to the Crown Act, ending male primogeniture. However, crucially, the reform was not made retroactive, meaning that it did not alter Anne's placement. The act applied only to those born after October 2011. Thus, Princess Anne remained down the line, behind her brothers, even after the law changed. Contemporary commentary often noted that Anne would have ranked much higher if born under the new rules. Next, we have Princess Charlotte of Monaco. Princess Charlotte was the illegitimate but later adopted daughter of Prince Louis II of Monaco. Initially, she was hereditary princess and heir to the Monegasque throne. However, in 1944, Charlotte formally renounced her succession rights to the throne of Monaco. By relinquishing her claim in the will, she effectively excluded herself from the line of succession, allowing her only son, Rainier, to become her heir apparent. Prince Rainier III indeed succeeded to the throne in 1949, shortly after Louis II's death, thanks to Charlotte's earlier renunciation. The renunciation was done by sovereign ordinance and accepted without public dispute. It was framed as Charlotte's own decision. Vicky French Radio even reported Princess Charlotte's abdication of rights in June 1944 as an official act. International media noted that this sacrifice ensured Monaco's continuity under her son. There was little controversy, as Charlotte was not being disinherited or punished even, but rather voluntarily stepping aside. Contemporary observers liken it to a form of abdication for the good of the country's stability. This carefully managed exclusion had a successful outcome. Rainier III became one of Monaco's most transformative rulers, and Charlotte lived out her days as a commoner in all but title. She retained the ducal title of Duchess of Valentinios, but zero allowance. Prince Rainier later acknowledged that his mother renounced her rights of succession to pave his way to the throne. And at number 1, we have Princess Louise of Belgium. Princess Louise, the eldest daughter of King Leopold II of Belgium, was effectively disinherited by her father. Leopold II had amassed a vast personal fortune, but chose to leave only a minimal portion to his daughters. In his 1909 will, he bequeathed a mere $3 million split among Louise and her 2 sisters, calling it a practical disinheritance. This king had secretly transferred much of his wealth to his mistress and illegitimate sons, as well as placed estates in a company to shield them from his daughters' claims. As a result, Princess Louise was largely excluded from her royal father's fortune. The disinheritance sparked public scandal. Louise sued the Belgian state and her sisters, arguing for a rightful inheritance. Contemporary newspapers reported on the gigantic legal battle looming over the king's wealth. However, the Belgian government mediated a settlement, offering each princess a lump sum. Louise obstinately refused the deal and pursued litigation, which dragged on until World War I interrupted proceedings. She did eventually recover a portion of her funds in 1914, but remained financially strained. Princess Louise died in 1924, embittered in exile. She had lived her final years in relative poverty and isolation, writing memoirs to settle scores with her family. Her epitaph was bittersweet, a royal born to great privilege, but, quote, obviously excluded from any inheritance by her own father's design. With this, we end today's video. We'll be back shortly with a new one. Until then, happy watching, and do subscribe to our channel if you still haven't.